So here's a question for you. When it comes to faith, is it supposed to be a blind leap or more of a reasoned conclusion? Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful passage from the Quran that argues for a faith built on critical thinking, not just on tradition. Let's get into it.
Yeah, this is really the big question at the heart of our explainer today. And the Quranic passage we're looking at, it doesn't just ask this. It makes a pretty decisive case that faith is actually meant to be a conclusion you reason your way to.
So, where does the Quran's argument for reason even begin? Well, you might be surprised. It doesn't start with some dense, complicated philosophy. It starts with the universe itself. Welcome to part one, a universe full of signs. Okay, so this one line right here basically sets the stage for the entire argument. After pointing out all the wonders of the cosmos, the text says there's signs, but, and this is the key part, they're specifically for a people who use reason. The message couldn't be clearer. It's not just about looking at the world, it's about thinking about it. So what exactly are these signs? Well, the passage essentially lays out its own kind of cosmological proof. It points to all these observable, predictable systems that run our world. You know, the rhythm of night and day, the actual physics that let giant ships float on the sea, the water cycle that brings rain, the incredible diversity of life, all of it. The argument here is that faith is supposed to be grounded in things we can actually see and understand. So this leads to a pretty logical next question, right? If the evidence is all around us, woven into the very fabric of the universe, why doesn't everybody just arrive at the same conclusion? Why do some people just refuse to see it?
Well, according to the text, the roadblock isn't always intellectual. A lot of the time, it's actually emotional. And that brings us to part two, the heart's misplaced love.
The Quran points to this really fascinating psychological idea. We're going to call it the love shift. The core concept is that disbelief isn't just about making an intellectual mistake. It's an emotional miscalculation. It's what happens when that absolute love and total devotion that's meant for the Creator gets rerouted and aimed at created things instead, like other people, your status, or your wealth. And this love shift, it creates two totally different paths. On the one hand, devotion to the Creator is presented as the foundation of your faith, something that brings you strength and clarity. But when you aim that same level of devotion at creation, at people or things or ideas, it's framed as this fragile bond, a kind of misplaced worship that's ultimately going to lead to regret, because all of those things are temporary. The passage then paints this incredibly dramatic picture of how it all ends. Leaders will actually abandon the very people who followed them, and all those worldly connections will just be severed. This really hammers home a central Quranic idea: personal responsibility. You can't just outsource your faith and your accountability to someone else. So it's not just our own internal emotions. The argument then points to a massive external force that can stop us from thinking for ourselves. And this brings us to part three, the trap of blind tradition. The passage uses this really interesting term hutuwat, which translates to steps of Satan. Now that word steps is so important because it suggests that falling into error isn't some big dramatic leap. No, it's a gradual process, a series of tiny compromises. It's described as being encouraged to speak about God without knowledge, which of course just reinforces that blind following. And right here, we get the classic defense for tradition. When people are told, hey, follow what God has revealed, the comeback is, nope, we're going to stick with what we found our ancestors doing. This is presented as the core argument for just clinging to the past, no matter what the evidence looks like in the present. But the Quran's response is this incredibly sharp, direct question that just cuts right through that logic. It asks, well, what if your ancestors didn't get it? What if they weren't guided? That simple question forces you to actually evaluate tradition, not just accept it without thinking. Okay, so all of this, the signs in the universe, the emotional attachments, the trap of tradition, it all builds up to one of the most powerful metaphors in the entire passage. It perfectly captures the difference between just passively copying and actively understanding. Part 4, hearing versus understanding. The text uses this analogy of a shepherd and his flock. And it's pretty direct. People who blindly follow tradition are compared to animals in a flock. They can hear the shepherd's call. They hear the sound, right? But they have absolutely zero comprehension of the meaning behind the words. They react, but they don't actually understand.
So you're left with these two completely different ways of being. You've got the flock, which is all about passive reception, hearing a sound without getting the meaning, following without asking questions. The text even describes this state as being deaf, dumb, and blind. And then you have the thinker, which is all about active engagement, using your reason to understand the message and really comprehend the world.
So, the crucial point, the final verdict of this whole passage is this. Blind imitation, especially when it comes to something as important as faith, actually reduces a thinking human being to the level of a creature that just hears noise, not meaning. It's a powerful call to elevate ourselves way beyond just copying what we've seen before.
And so the passage leaves all of us with a pretty profound question to ask ourselves. Is what you believe the result of a conscious, reasoned choice, or is it just an echo of what you've always been told?